If you'd told me that volunteering to clean up an old church would be the most awkward, hilarious, and unexpectedly romantic afternoon of my life, I probably would have laughed in your face. But here I am, sitting on a dusty pew with dust motes, dancing in the late afternoon sun, trying to figure out how exactly I ended up in a cramped confessional booth with the last guy the first ever expected to get stuck next to, let alone feel anything for. So, quick background. I'm Alex, 27. Your average graphic designer with zero religious zeal, but an overenthusiastic friend named Mark who somehow convinced me to join him for this community service gig. The church itself is this crumbling old building on the edge of town, the kind of place that looks like it's been forgotten by time but still holds onto every creak and shadow like a memory. We were supposed to just clean up, sweep, dust, maybe polish some pews, and then call it a day. Easy enough, right? Enter Ethan. He's this guy from the neighborhood who showed up at the same time as us. Tall, with this messy dark hair that looks like he's been running his hands through it all morning, and eyes that made me feel like I'd been caught doing something I wasn't supposed to. Which, honestly, might have been true because I was definitely not expecting to feel my heart jump in a place like this. From the moment we started working, there was this weird electricity. Not the kind you get from flirting, or one of those cheesy rom-com moments. More like the kind you feel when you realize someone sees the same weird, quiet parts of the world as you do. Ethan was quiet, but not in a shy way. More like he was just thoughtful. When he laughed, it was like a release, sudden and honest, and it made me want to hear it again. Anyway, things were going fine until Mark decided we should divide and conquer. He went off to wrestle with some ancient hymn books, leaving me and Ethan to tackle the back of the church, where the confessional booth stood. Now, you'd think cleaning a confessional would be straightforward, but these things are like little time capsules full of dust, cobwebs, and, apparently, some seriously awkward creaks. At some point, I swear the floorboard gave way or something, because the next thing I knew, Ethan and I were both crouched inside the same tiny booth, trying not to knock over the old, creaky divider. We were stuck, and if you've never been in a confessional with another guy, let me tell you, that's a whole new level of close quarters panic. And that's where I'm sitting now, knees nearly touching, trying to keep it together while the only thing separating us is a thin wooden screen and a history of hundreds of whispered secrets. I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but there's no way I'm just going to awkwardly whisper sorry and crawl out without knowing the story has some kind of twist. Because sometimes, life throws you into the strangest places, with the strangest people, and suddenly, you realize maybe you weren't supposed to be alone after all. I could barely hear myself think over the pounding of my heart and the faint creak of the wooden divider between us. Ethan's breathing was steady, but close. Too close. I swallowed hard and tried to focus on something other than the fact that we were stuck in a confessional, like some cliché from a bad movie. So this is new, I finally said, my voice sounding way too loud in the tiny space. Ethan chuckled softly. Yeah, definitely not how I planned to spend my Saturday. Me neither, I admitted, shifting slightly, which made the divider groan ominously. We should probably figure out a way to get out of here before Mark realizes we've disappeared. He nodded, but he was quiet for a second, and I caught a flicker of something in his eyes. Maybe amusement, maybe hesitation. You know, he said, it's weird, right? Being in here like this place, it's supposed to be for confessing secrets. Yeah, I said, trying to keep my tone light. I don't think my biggest secret is that I'm stuck in a church booth with a stranger who might be judging me for my terrible taste in music. He laughed again, and that sound, honest and easy, made my chest tighten a little. I'm not judging. Well, maybe a little. We both smiled, and in that moment, the whole weirdness of the situation started to fade, replaced by something more comfortable. It felt like, even in this cramped, dusty booth, there was a kind of connection forming. Like, maybe this was exactly where we were supposed to be. So what's your story? I asked, curious despite myself. He shrugged. Not much to tell. Grew up around here. Dad's a carpenter, Mom works at the library. I just moved back after college. Needed a change of scenery. Same here, I said. I'm a graphic designer, but I've been thinking about, I don't know, doing something different. Figured volunteering might be a start. He nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes you need to shake things up to figure out what you really want. There was a pause, comfortable this time, not filled with awkwardness. I could hear the dust settling, the distant sound of Mark muttering to himself as he wrestled with those ancient hymn books. Then Ethan's voice dropped a little, quieter. Ever been in a place like this? Like somewhere that feels full of memories even if you don't know the people who made them? I thought about that, I guess. My grandparents' house. It's old, creaky, smells like wood polish and old books. Feels like a time capsule, too. Yeah, he said. That's it, exactly. We both fell silent again, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if it was the confined space or the conversation, but something about Ethan made me want to open up more. To say things I usually kept buried. Sometimes, I said slowly, I worry I'm just drifting through life, like I'm waiting for something to happen but don't know what. You ever feel like that? All the time, he admitted. That's why I moved back. Needed to find myself, or at least figure out who I want to be. I smiled. Sounds like we're both on the same page. Before I could say more, there was a sudden creak from the divider. Ethan's eyes widened. Okay, that's definitely bad. I tried to hold back a laugh. Yeah, we might be the reason this place needs a serious restoration fund. We both leaned a little to ease the pressure, and finally, with a slow, groaning sound, the divider shifted enough for me to wiggle free. I stood up quickly, stretching cramped muscles. Ethan followed suit, and we both let out breaths of relief. The late afternoon light was soft, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. So, I said, brushing dust from my jeans, now that we're out of the confessional, do you want to grab a coffee? I feel like this needs some serious debriefing. He smiled, that easy, genuine smile that made me forget all about the awkwardness from a few minutes ago. Yeah, I'd like that. As we walked out of the church together, leaving behind the creaks and the dust and the old secrets, I realized something kind of amazing. Sometimes the most unexpected places lead you right where you need to be. And maybe this old church wasn't just about cleaning up after all. We stepped outside into the cool evening air, the sun low enough to cast a golden glow that made the church's peeling paint and cracked stained glass look almost romantic in a fading, forgotten kind of way. The quiet street was empty except for a stray cat slinking past a trash can, and I felt a strange kind of calm settle over me, like the whole morning's weirdness was fading into something real. So I said, trying to keep my voice casual, even though my heart was still doing that stupid, crazy thing, coffee sounds like a plan? Ethan smiled, that easy smile again, the one that felt like it was meant just for me in this empty street. Yeah. There's a little cafe a couple of blocks from here. Not fancy, but decent. Open late. We started walking, our footsteps echoing softly against the cracked sidewalks, and I was suddenly hyper-aware of how close we were, close enough to hear each other breathing, to catch the little shifts in posture and expression that say way more than words. So, Ethan said, breaking the comfortable silence, what made you say yes to this whole volunteering thing? I mean, I know Mark's been on your case, but it's not exactly your usual scene, right? I laughed, a little embarrassed. Yeah, Mark's the persistent type. Plus, I guess I felt like I needed to do something different. You know, get out of my own head for a bit. What about you? He shrugged, but his smile softened. I needed to connect, not just with people, but with somewhere that felt solid, I guess. This town, this church, even though it's falling apart, it feels like a link to something real. I nodded, liking the way he said that. Yeah, I get that. We reached the cafe, a tiny place with chipped paint on the sign, and a little bell that jingled when we walked in. The smell of fresh coffee and baked goods hit me, warm and inviting, and for the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe out. We ordered 2 coffees and found a small table by the window. The light was dim, shadows pooling around us, but I barely noticed. I was too caught up in watching Ethan's face as he talked about his family, about the part of town he remembered from childhood, about his dreams of maybe opening his own woodshop someday. There was something raw and genuine about him, the way he spoke with quiet passion, like he didn't need to shout to be heard. And I found myself wanting to know everything, his fears, his hopes, the little things that made his world. So I said, stirring my coffee. What about now? What's next for you? He looked out the window, tracing a crack in the glass with his finger. Honestly, I'm still figuring that out, but I'm tired of waiting for life to happen. I want to be part of it, you know? I smiled, feeling a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Yeah, me too. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, the kind of conversation that makes you lose track of time and place. The cafe slowly emptied, the lights flickered, and outside, the world went dark and quiet. When it was finally time to go, Ethan walked me to my car. The street was empty again, the night settling in like a soft blanket. Thanks for the company, he said, his voice low and a little shy. No, thank you, I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. There was a pause, a moment suspended in the cool night air, and then he smiled. Really smiled, and I felt it like a jolt straight to my chest. Maybe we could do this again sometime? He asked. I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the coffee. I'd like that. As I drove home, the city lights blurring past, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, getting stuck in that confessional wasn't the worst thing that happened to me that day. Maybe it was the start of something I didn't even know I was looking for. And for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it might lead. The next few days after that cafe night were a blur of normal routines, but with this quiet anticipation humming under everything. I caught myself glancing at my phone more than usual, half expecting a message from Ethan. I told myself not to get my hopes up. It was just coffee, right? But the truth was, there was something about him that felt different, like I'd finally found a part of the puzzle that had been missing. Then, out of the blue, I got a text from him. Just a simple, hey, any chance you're free this weekend? There's a farmer's market down by the square. Thought it might be fun. I stared at that message like it was a secret code. My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a beat. Then I typed back, yeah, I'm in. Saturday arrived with this weird mix of nervous energy and excitement. When I showed up at the square, Ethan was already there, leaning against a lamppost, looking way too casual and effortlessly handsome in a worn leather jacket and jeans. My breath caught, and I had to remind myself to breathe. Hey, Alex. He greeted me with that easy grin, the one that still made my stomach flip. Glad you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, I said, trying to sound cooler than I felt. We wandered through the stalls, the air thick with the smells of fresh bread, roasting coffee, and sweet flowers. We sampled homemade jams, debated the best kind of cheese, and somehow ended up at a tiny booth selling handcrafted wooden trinkets. Ethan's eyes lit up like a kid in a candy store, and he started explaining the different types of wood and finishes like he was in his element. I watched him, utterly fascinated by how passionate he got. At one point, he caught me staring, and he laughed. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you pick out a saw. Yet, I smiled. That might be a deal breaker, actually. He nudged me gently. Well, maybe I'll teach you a few things. We kept walking, side by side, the kind of easy companionship that felt like we'd known each other longer than a couple of days. After a while, we found a quiet bench and sat, the hum of the market buzzing around us but somehow muted between us. So, I said, what got you into woodworking? You mentioned your dad's a carpenter. Ethan's expression softened. Yeah, I grew up watching him build things. Tables, chairs, sometimes little toys for the neighborhood kids. It was like magic to me, turning raw wood into something useful or beautiful. But I never thought I'd actually do it myself until recently. I nodded, understanding that feeling all too well. Sometimes it takes moving away to figure out what really matters. Exactly. He looked at me, eyes steady. I've been thinking about starting my own workshop. Maybe teaching too, not just making things, but helping others find a craft. There was a vulnerability in his voice that made me want to reach out and hold on to that moment forever. Sounds like a dream worth chasing, I said quietly. He smiled, and for a second, the world felt still. Then he surprised me by slipping his hand into mine, fingers threading together with a natural ease that made my heart race and my whole body sit up straighter. Maybe you could be my first student, he whispered. I didn't hesitate. I'm in. That afternoon, we talked about everything. The past, the future, the little things that made us who we were. And somewhere between the sun setting over the square and the chilly breeze curling around us, it hit me how unexpected this all was. How something as random as cleaning an old church had led me here, to this moment, to him. When it was time to say goodbye, Ethan pulled me into a hug that was warm and real, the kind that says, without words, I want more of this. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Maybe life wasn't about waiting for something to happen. Maybe it was about taking those strange, messy chances. Getting stuck in dusty booths, sharing coffee, holding hands in the middle of a crowded market. And with Ethan by my side, I was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed felt like piecing together a new kind of normal. Ethan and I fell into this easy rhythm, texts about random things during the day, quick calls when one of us was stuck on a work problem, and little meetups that slowly grew into something more than just casual hangouts. It was still early, that heady stage where everything feels fresh but fragile, like we were both testing the waters, wondering if this could really be more. One Thursday evening, Ethan invited me over to his place to teach me some basics. I wasn't expecting much, maybe a quick lesson, a few jokes, and a couple of splinters. But when I arrived, I found this tiny workshop tucked into the back of his mom's garage. It smelled like cedar and sawdust, with tools hanging neatly on pegboards and half-finished projects scattered around like clues to his passion. He greeted me with that sly smile of his and handed me a pair of gloves. Ready to get your hands dirty, I grinned. Bring it on. We started with something stupidly simple, sanding a small wooden box. But even that felt kind of intimate, passing tools back and forth, his hands steady and sure next to mine. There was something grounding about watching him work, focused, patient, completely in his element. At one point, I accidentally knocked over a small jar of nails, and they clattered to the floor. I bent down to pick them up, fumbling with my gloves, and suddenly Ethan's hand was there, guiding mine. Easy? He said softly. And for a moment, our fingers lingered, the roughness of his hands against the smoothness of mine sparking something electric. I looked up, catching him, watching me with this quiet intensity that made my breath hitch. Neither of us said anything, but the air between us shifted, heavier now, charged. Maybe we should take a break, I blurted, suddenly aware of how close we were sitting on that little stool. He laughed, a little nervous maybe, and nodded. Yeah, probably a good idea. We stepped outside into the cool night air, the garage door opened to reveal a sky littered with stars. Ethan pulled his jacket tighter around him, and I realized I was shivering. Not from the cold. Want to grab a drink? I know a quiet spot nearby, he asked. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. The bar was this low-key place, the kind with wooden booths and dim lighting that made everything feel a little more private. We found the corner table, ordered beers, and settled in. The conversation flowed easily, but beneath the surface, I could feel this undercurrent of something unspoken, like we were both waiting for permission to cross a line neither of us wanted to mess up. After a while, Ethan leaned in, eyes searching mine. Alex, I don't want to rush things, but I also don't want to pretend I'm not feeling this. I swallowed hard, the words I'd been holding back suddenly tumbling out. Me too. It's scary, but it feels right. He smiled, relief and something softer shining in his gaze. Then maybe we don't have to figure it all out right now. Just see where this goes. I reached across the table, fingers brushing his hand. The touch was electric, an unspoken promise. As the night deepened, we talked about fears and hopes, about what we wanted and what we were afraid to lose. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not just for the surface stuff, but for the messy, complicated pieces I usually kept hidden. Walking him back to his place, the world felt like it had slowed down, every step charged with possibility. At his door, we paused, the silence stretching out between us. Good night, Ethan, I said softly. Good night, Alex, he replied. And then, without thinking, he pulled me into a hug, warm, tight, the kind that says you're safe here. I stayed there a moment longer than I should have, breathing him in, wanting to memorize this feeling. When I finally pulled away, There was a new weight in the air, not pressure, but promise. And as I walked to my car, I realized that sometimes the scariest leaps are the ones that lead you exactly where you need to be. The next morning, I woke up with this strange mix of excitement and nervousness that made it hard to focus on anything beyond replaying last night in my head. That hug had been something warm, unspoken, full of potential. It felt like the start of a new chapter, but also like stepping off a cliff without knowing if there was a net below. I spent the day distracted, hopping between emails and half-finished projects, my mind drifting back to Ethan more times than I'd care to admit. At some point, I sent him a text. "Hey, you made a pretty good teacher yesterday. When's the next class?" His reply came almost immediately. "Next weekend, if you survive the sanding. Coffee after?" I smiled, feeling a pulse of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. That weekend rolled around, and I found myself actually looking forward to getting my hands covered in sawdust again. Ethan's workshop felt different this time, warmer somehow, like it was filled with possibility instead of just wood chips and tools. We spent hours working on a small wooden frame, me fumbling through the steps and Ethan patiently guiding me through every cut and joint. There were plenty of moments where I thought I might mess it up completely, but he never let me get discouraged. Instead, he'd just smile and say, "You're getting there." At one point, I caught him watching me with that same quiet intensity from before, and I felt a flutter in my chest. When our hands brushed over the sandpaper, the heat between us was impossible to ignore. After we wrapped up, Ethan leaned against the workbench, looking tired but happy. "So what does our budding carpenter want to do next week?" "Maybe a stool?" I laughed. "One step at a time, master." He grinned and then, out of nowhere, asked, "Hey, would you want to come with me to that church again? The one we cleaned last week?" I blinked, surprised. "Yeah? Sure. Why?" "I don't know," he said, shrugging. "I just feel like there's something there. Like it's more than just an old building. Maybe we could explore it or, I don't know, see what it means to us." The idea stuck with me as we walked out into the fading light. There was something about the church that had pulled us both in, like it was a quiet witness to everything new between us. So, a few days later, we found ourselves back at the church, the place where it all started. The sun was setting behind the steeple, casting long shadows that made the worn wood and cracked windows look even more alive. We slipped inside, the air cool and still, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people in the world. We wandered through the empty pews, the silence wrapping around us like a secret. Then, almost without thinking, Ethan reached for my hand. It was a simple gesture, but the warmth of his touch made my heart skip. "Remember when we got stuck in that confessional?" I said, trying for lightness. He chuckled. "How could I forget? I thought we were going to break the divider." We moved toward the booth, sitting down side by side this time. No barriers between us. The quiet of the church was different now, not just old and forgotten, but full of something alive, like it held space for beginnings, confessions, and maybe even forgiveness. Ethan looked at me, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "I'm glad we're here." Together, I squeezed his hand, feeling the truth of that deep in my chest. "Me too." We didn't need to say more. Sometimes, the best moments are the ones where words fall away, and you just exist in the same space, knowing that whatever comes next, you won't have to face it alone. As we left the church that evening, the sky darkening and stars beginning to peek out, I realized how far I'd come, from a guy dragged into volunteering by a friend, to someone who found unexpected connection in the most unlikely place. And with Ethan by my side, the future didn't seem so scary after all. It felt like something worth building, one small step at a time. The days after that evening at the church were some of the most unexpectedly sweet I'd had in a long time. There was this ease between Ethan and me now, like the walls we'd both been quietly building were starting to come down without either of us rushing it. It felt right to just be there, in the space between friendship and whatever this was becoming. One Thursday, Ethan invited me over for dinner. Not the usual grab something quick or let's meet at a cafe, but a real sitting around the table meal cooked by him. I was a little surprised, mostly because his place was still a work in progress kind of mess, but that made it feel even more genuine. He greeted me at the door, a little nervous smile that made me want to kiss him right there. "Hey, hope you're hungry." "Always," I said, grinning. The kitchen smelled like garlic and roasted vegetables, and as we chopped and stirred together, there was this quiet dance of familiarity, teasing about my terrible knife skills, making each other laugh over a shared story or silly joke. It was like we were building something beyond just a meal. We sat down with plates full of food and wine glasses half full, and for a while the conversation floated easily. But then Ethan got quiet, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "Alex," he said, voice low, "there's something I've been wanting to tell you." I looked up, heart skipping. "Yeah?" He took a breath. "I know we're still figuring things out, but I don't want to just be someone who's fun to hang out with. I want to be more. I want to see where this goes." It felt like the whole world stopped for a second. I reached across the table, took his hand in mine, and said, "I want that too, more than anything." His smile was soft, relieved, and it made my chest feel like it could burst. After dinner, we moved to the couch, leaning into each other in a way that felt natural and electric all at once. We talked about what we wanted, not just from each other, but from life, about fears of getting hurt, about hope for something real. At one point, Ethan looked at me, eyes shining. "I've never really told anyone this, but I used to think that love like this wasn't for me, that I'd always be alone." I squeezed his hand tighter. "I'm glad you're wrong." He laughed, a little shaky, and leaned his forehead against mine. "Me too." Over the next few weeks, our bond deepened. We kept building, whether it was the wooden projects in his workshop, or the quiet moments sharing music, or the way we started to carve out a space in each other's lives that felt safe and ours alone. There were awkward moments, of course, like the time I accidentally called him by my ex's name when we were joking around, or when Ethan got nervous meeting my friends for the first time. But those moments just made us more real, more human. One rainy Saturday, we found ourselves back at the church for the community cleanup day, only this time we weren't just volunteers, we were a team, sweeping, painting, carrying boxes, working side by side with a kind of easy rhythm that made the hard work lighter. During a break, we sat on the steps, soaked but laughing, and I realized how far from that first day we'd come. From being stuck in that confessional booth like strangers, to sitting close enough now that I could feel Ethan's breath on my skin. He looked at me, eyes serious. "You know, I think this place saved us." I smiled. "Or maybe it just gave us a chance to find each other." He leaned in and kissed me. Soft, sure, everything I didn't even know I was waiting for. As the rain started again, we didn't move. Sometimes, the best moments are the ones you don't rush, the ones you just hold on to and let carry you forward. And as I sat there with Ethan, wet and smiling on those old church steps, I knew this was just the beginning. Months passed, and the church we'd cleaned and restored together became more than just a backdrop to our story. It felt like a quiet witness to everything we were building. The pews we polished, the windows we scrubbed, and yes, even that confessional booth where it all started, held echoes of laughter, of conversations, and of moments shared between two people figuring out how to be together. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in soft oranges and pinks, Ethan and I found ourselves back inside that same old church. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and candle wax. We sat side by side on the last pew, fingers intertwined, comfortable in the silence. "I was thinking," Ethan said, his voice thoughtful, "about how weird it is that a place like this brought us together. I mean, it's old, kind of forgotten, and maybe a little broken, kind of like us before we met." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Yeah. I guess sometimes the places that feel worn down have the most room to hold something new." He looked at me, eyes soft. "I'm glad we found each other." "Me too." And in that simple moment, it felt like everything else, the doubts, the fears, the waiting, just faded away. We stood up, and as we walked toward the exit, Ethan paused. "You know, I never thought I'd find someone who gets it. The quiet, the uncertainty, the hope. Sometimes you just have to get stuck in a confessional with the right person." I teased, and we both laughed. Outside, the evening air was cool, but the warmth between us was steady and sure. I realized then that love wasn't always about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes, it was about two people choosing to be present, to build something gentle and real amid the dust and the cracks. As we walked away from the church, hand in hand, I felt a quiet kind of happiness settle deep inside. This wasn't just a story about cleaning an old building. It was about finding a home, in a person, in a moment, and a chance taken when you least expect it. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.